bleed green? Are you an ultimate Eagles football fan? Well, you're in the right place. Ready? This is Birds 365, hosted by the new Mac and Mac, Jody McDonald and John McMullen. Here we go! Who collectively have covered and talked about more than 50 plus years of Eagles football. Kick off your day with Birds 365. You'll get debate. We love to argue. You'll get the real story from inside the locker room. And you'll hear from some of the great football minds from around the region. You're about to become an Eagles insider. Get in the game. Join Jody Mack and Johnny Mack and join the football community that flocks to Birds 365. Birds 365 starts right now.
Welcome to the NFL. Let's go! Let's go! Go!
And a good Tuesday morning, Birds fans. Appreciate you streaming on in here on Birds 365. You got Mac and Mac, John McMullen and Jody McDonald here to hang with you for the next 2 hours to talk Philadelphia Eagles football for sure, but there are also some national football stories that may or may not directly, but they may at some point have an effect on the Philadelphia Eagles. We got a bunch that we can sink our teeth into. We got two good guests coming your way. We'll give you the details on that in just a second. John, since last we left 2-2, and oh, by the way, 2-2 is how much longer we have to wait for the draft. That's 2 weeks and 2 days.
2 days. Yeah, we're getting close. It's creeping up.
It truly is. No Eagles safety net signings, draft proofing, call it what you want, over the last 24, 48, 72 hours. So all the attention and the focus is on the draft. And we can't get past this Bijan Robinson.
I blame Peter King, your guy, Peter King. Come on, Peter.
No, Peter is there to give you what he believes, what his opinion is, not what is best for the Philadelphia Eagles and or the Philadelphia media market. Yeah, yesterday he said the Eagles should abandon what they've been doing since Howie Roseman has taken over as the general manager and use not only a first-round pick, but a high first-round pick, the 10th overall pick on a running back. We know that is not Howie Roseman's style. And I think when push comes to shove, if the Eagles have the chance to pick Bijan Robinson at number 10, I don't think they'll do it. But it's not an outrageous conversation. This is another one of those regular Philadelphia topics. And yeah, I'm going to get on Philadelphia fans. I can get on all the fans across the country. Shoot, I could get on all Americans across the country because our stupid society has gotten so much to whereby you have to make a choice and you have to take a stand and you got to be over the top about it. You have to downplay and deride the other side if they're not on the same side of the argument as you. Either Bijan Robinson is going to be the greatest running back in the history of the National Football League, or anyone who suggests it is an idiot because Howie Roseman's track record says he's never going to do it. Why have we become that, John, that it has to be the polar opposite ends of every debate?
Yeah, and by the way, I think that's more of a social media thing. I think in the real world,
John, in case you haven't noticed, social media scores a lot of points in the real world.
Oh,
today.
I know, but I just don't think that's the real world. I think in the real world, there's many more nuanced opinions, and most people understand that. So I think it's kind of a small, the old. A small minority of people screaming the loudest and they get heard the loudest. I think there's a lot of contextual people. I still think there's more, thank God, as a whole. But for what you and I do, there's less. So we're condensed in that bubble. You get hardcore fans that call on WIP and they're you got to make a decision. He's the greatest running back since Jim Brown and blah, blah, blah. Is he better than Jim Brown? I like what, but and social media and all that kind of stuff. So we get to see it. We get to be on the front lines, and yeah, it's silly, it's ridiculous, and if Peter is listening, I'm poking fun. He can do what he wants, obviously, and it's not the craziest. It's a very good prospect. I've talked, and I count every year. I've talked to 8 scouts so far, so 8 personnel people. And I've asked them the same question that you've heard me ask on the show to certain people. How many true blue chip players are in this draft? And every single one of them has Bijan in there.
Right.
So he's one of the best 5 or 6 or 7 or 8. That's the most blue chippers. I got 8. He's among those players. And if you're picking 10, then it's not crazy. But then you go into the context, and for us that have been around Philadelphia and Howie Roseman and how he feels about certain things, he's not going to do it. I mean, and I'm on the air every day here with you, Jody. I'm on the air every day in South Jersey. You're on the air every day in Philadelphia, practically. We're going to be here after the draft. If I get it wrong, I'm not hiding. I'll say I got it wrong, but every indication I've gotten from Howie Roseman over the years, in front of the camera and behind the camera, more importantly, he's not doing it. So to me, it's a waste of time. But to others, all right, if you want to talk about it, knock yourself out. But he's not taking running back at number 10. And I'm trying to make people understand the way he thinks, or the way I think he thinks, and it's the old, which I reference too much. It's the old Moneyball approach. So, when people look at Miles Sanders, career year, he had 1,269 yards last year, and I think Kenny Gainwell was at 240, and I think Boston Scott is at 219. So we're talking just under 1,700 yards, a little bit over 1,730 yards, 1,728 to be exact. That's what he wants to replace. That's it. Now, could Bijan Robinson get 1,500 as a rookie? Sure. But what does it matter if you can get 800 from Rashad Penny or another draft choice in second or third? Kenny Gainwell really did play well in the playoffs. If he amps up to 500, 600, and Boston Scott gives you his typical 240 against the Giants, whatever, you're right back in that range, and you spent, $600,000 guaranteed for Rashad Penny or a cost-effective second-round pick, whatever you want to do, however you go about it. Plus, you have the big-time defensive lineman or the big-time offensive lineman. That's the part that people don't understand. So when Howie does this valuation aspect of it, from his standpoint, it's not close. He's not doing it. Because even if 1,730 turns into 1,630, doesn't matter, especially when you and then the curveball, the further curveball to it all is Jalen Hurts. And I've kind of said this counterintuitively. He makes running backs better. He makes running backs better. There are, traditional quarterbacks, they don't do that. You got to get your yardage on your own, and with the help of the offensive line, obviously, and the Eagles have a tremendous offensive line as well. But if you have a traditional play action quarterback, Jody, well, they're just going to hand the ball off, and there's no +1. There's +1 in Philly all day. And I dug up the quote from Nick Sirianni talking about front side wins games, backside wins championships. In other words, the threat of Jalen Hurts pulling the football and taking it out the backside freaks out defenses so much that they have to account for it, whether he's running the football or not. And it makes running backs better. You don't need the best running back with Jalen Hurts. All you need is competency. And then you add in the offensive line on top of it, it's a waste of a valuable resource. That's how Howie Roseman is going to look at this.
And I don't blame him. Did you say Kenny Gainwell played well in the playoffs?
Yes.
Or did he play well against the Giants? I don't remember Kenny Gainwell dominating either.
Kenny Gainwell was great in the playoffs. You're talking about Boston Scott plays well against the Giants.
Kenny Gainwell.
Kenny Gainwell was great in the playoffs. He was great in the Super Bowl. He's great. I mean, he doesn't touch it a lot, but he became essentially the guy with the most production because Miles Sanders didn't play well. Kenny had a disappointing off season, not off season, regular season, but he was solid in the playoffs when he got touches. He was a good player.
Versus San Francisco, 14 carries, 48 yards, 3.4 per against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, 7 rushes, 21 yards, 3 yards a carry. Neither one of those is all that good. He was great against the Giants in the first game. They're certainly their best back and one of their better offensive players, and they had a big lead, and they could certainly give it to him, and he certainly was great, but he didn't do anything special against either the 49ers or the Chiefs.
Well, he showed some juice, and the numbers, obviously you want the numbers to be up like 6 with Rashad Penny. And by no means do I think he's a lead back, but they were very excited. The Eagles were very excited about what he showed in the postseason. He was certainly better than Miles Sanders in the postseason. And, as a complimentary back, they're excited that he's going to take the next step. Now, they still need the lead back, and whether that's Rashad Penny or a draft choice, that's the guy that's going to do the majority of that getting to 1,730 yards. But it doesn't have to be Miles. It just has to be incremental improvement from Kenny Gainwell. And a typical, again, behind Jason Kelce and Lane Johnson and Landon Dickerson. And on and on and on, the best offensive line in football. It's a waste of a valuable resource. And typically, when you're a good team, and by definition, the NFC champions are a good team, even though they lost significant pieces. And by the way, that even bolsters the argument because you got to replace those pieces. You don't often get to pick number 10. Because Howie fleeced people. He doesn't like that term, but we'll use it. Mm-hmm. And the Eagles are picking at number 10, not by merit, because they were a good football team. It is a waste of a valuable asset. So that's my case of why they're not taking Bijan.
And I'm partly in agreement with you. And when I say partly, here's what I mean. I would not have a problem taking a running back in the first round if he is the next Barry Sanders, if he is the next Emmitt Smith, if he is the next, let's go back in the time machine all the way to Jim Brown. Okay, yeah, I'll use a 10th pick in the draft if I know that I'm getting one of those 3 guys. I honestly don't know that about Bijan Robinson. I believe he's the best back in the draft. I'm a big fan of Zach Charbonnet, who I rank as the second best back in the draft ahead of Gibbs from Alabama. And I think there's a difference, but not this cavernous distance between the two. So if you told me that with their pick in the second round, which doesn't come till into the 60s, Zach Charbonnet would still be on the board, and I'm not taking a running back at number 10 because I'm getting who I think is the second best back and not that big a drop off from Robinson at number 60 something. And I can take 2 other players in between at 10 and 30 and upgrade and fill those roster spots, the losses that they had on defense. You bet your bottom dollar I'm doing that. Now, unfortunately, I got my football crystal ball here. It's a little hazy. So I don't know that Zach Charbonnet is going to be sitting there at number 60 when the Eagles come up on the board in the second round. If I knew that, it'd be real easy. Thank you very much. Good luck to the Bijan Robinson playing somewhere else. I'm not even considering it, but that's not how the draft works. And yeah, I don't know that he's we've had 2 running backs taken very high in the last 6 or 7 years. And that was certainly Saquon Barkley, who just re-signed with Giants, franchise tag at $10 million. Not really that bad for the season they had last year. Now, he was really good last year. He gets injured way too much, and that's part of what you have to take into consideration when you're drafting a back in the first round. And the other one is a guy who's actually out there right now and available in Ezekiel Elliott, who had a tremendous first 4 or 5 years with the Cowboys. You've seen the wear on the tires. You're dropping off. He can't even get himself a job these years. But that's what you're drafting a running back for, is that first 5 years. And then we couldn't believe what Miles Sanders had to sign for this year. The league has devalued running backs, and taking it all in that light, does taking a running back at number 10 in the draft play for Eagle fans? Apparently they think this guy is going to be the next Barry Sanders, because I don't know that. If I knew that, I would commit to it. I would say, okay, I know I'm getting Barry Sanders. Give me Bijan Robinson at 10. How good a back do you think Robinson's going to be? Do you got a comp or a guy who you could put him up next to and say, here's the kind of production I think you're going to get from Bijan in the Eagles? Since we're talking about the Eagles, in the Eagles situation with Jalen Hurts, with the Eagles offensive line, how good a back are we talking about?
Well, I asked, because the one guy, I asked a couple scouts, the one guy the Eagles really, really liked was Christian McCaffrey. So, and the reason they liked Christian McCaffrey was because of his receiving ability. They knew he could run the football, but he was generational when it came to receiving ability. And I don't use that term lightly. I mean, generation means once in a generation. And he's not Christian McCaffrey catching the football. He's very good, but nobody is. Once in a generation means once in a generation. Mm-hmm. I don't use that terminology like everybody else does. Now, is he, forget about Jim, is he Adrian Peterson? I've asked that question because he's the best runner we've seen in the past 20, the best pure runner. I got to know. I got nose. No, he's not that good. He's not that dominant. So where are you? One name I got was Nick Chubb. Good player. Really good player.
10th pick in the draft for Nick Chubb in 2023? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. So, you got to be so unique to be in that category. The best examples you brought up, one is the Ezekiel Elliott. Maybe he could be Ezekiel Elliott. Saquon Barkley. Probably not from a physical, from a trade standpoint, but is that worth it? Either of those two players? Those are the two players I would look at it. And they've both been very good. Ezekiel's first 3 years, he was arguably the best running back in football.
Yep.
Saquon Barkley, when he's been healthy, has been the Giants' offense. Not a lot of help either. Both really good players. Are they worth it, though? I would say no. I think Howie's right. So is he going to be those guys? Maybe he is, but so what? Let somebody else deal with it.
Yeah, I would even say yes. I think he can be those two guys. The problem with Barkley is if you can comp him to Barkley, you have to comp in. And it could happen to Bijan that he's a part-time player because he's hurt, because you do need to use him, because you're going to lean on him. If you're going to use that higher draft pick on him, you're going to damn make sure that he gets his carries and his touches and give him the chance to make those plays. Well, that's when you put yourself at risk and you could end up hurt. That's what you need to be at a minimum for me if you're going to be using a pick that high in the draft. And I'm not ready to declare that as far as his talent level goes and what he can accomplish. Best back in the draft this year? Yes. But if you can get a guy like Charbonnet in the second round and use those other two first-round picks that you have to be able to fill some of the holes that you have by free agency departures on the defensive side of the ball this year, that's what I think Howie Roseman's going to do. All right, we're going to add a third voice to the mix. And he was pretty outspoken. I read one of his articles on Sports Illustrated about Bijan Robinson and whether he should be an Eagles consideration with the 10th pick in the draft. We'll punch up Ed Kratz, Johnny's running boy from Sports Illustrated, next here on Birds 365.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wild wood days.
They're carving them up and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Appreciate you being here with us on Birds 365, streaming in with the Mac and Mac guys. We are lucky enough to get John's running mate at Sports Illustrated, Eagle Maven, Ed Kratz, up for a good couple of minutes of conversation today. All right, we got to get you to weigh in like everybody else has, and we still got more than 2 weeks to go. Man, the draft can't get here fast enough. To Bijan or not to Bijan at number 10? That is the question, Ed Kratz. How do you frame an answer to that question?
Well, I was on Bijan from, day one, really. He was in my first mock draft for the Eagles. How do I frame it? I think that he would be a great benefit for this offense, to be honest with you. I think he would help take it to another level, and it was interesting to see how Jeffrey Lurie talked about offense, really made a point of saying that this is an offensive league, and they like to score points, and he's right. Everything is tilted against the defense in terms of rules and whatnot. So, I think he'd be a great addition to this offense. And if he truly is the best player available at number 10 when the Eagles pick, why wouldn't you take the best player available? But that said, and, I don't think they're going to do it. I just don't see them taking a running back. There's just not a lot of value at taking one at that position, especially in a draft that does have other options at the position, good options that could come later in the draft that would help this team, maybe not as much as Bijan, but it would help this team, no doubt. So I love Bijan. I think he's probably the best player in what I think is a draft that doesn't have a lot of star power to it. I'm not sure how many Hall of Famers there are going to be in this class, but I think Bijan Robinson probably is at the top of the list if you put it in that context. So, I think he's phenomenal, and I would love to see him, run, carry the ball, 15 to 20 times a game starting this fall, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
It's because where I am, Ed.
Yeah.
Howie's not taking a running back at 10, and
so.
it could be Jim Brown, the reincarnation of Jim Brown, and he's not going to take a running back at 10 in the modern environment. If things shifted, maybe we could revisit it down the road. But from his standpoint, the value's not there. So if he can get 800, I've used the money ball approach with Jody. If he can get 800 from Rashad Penny, 600 from maybe that's a little bit much, or 500 from Kenny Gainwell, the usual 250 from Boston Scott. Or you can insert name Jody likes Zach Carbonneau from UCLA. If he's the lead back, getting 800, 900 yards, that's good enough. Plus, you're getting maybe an edge rusher, maybe Jalen Carter, maybe a really, really good offensive lineman. And that's sort of the equation Howie Roseman is dealing with. Is he right or is he wrong?
Listen, he came into this organization in the 2000 as an intern.
Intern, yeah.
So he kind of learned at the knee of Andy Reid and Joe Banner, and this philosophy of building within the trenches. And he's not going to stray from that, I don't think. Especially when you look at edge rusher, like you mentioned, John, is who do you have there? You have Josh Sweat, you have Hassan Reddick, Brandon Graham, who's 35 years old, and then Derek Barnett, who is coming off an ACL injury. It's very thin.
That always perks Jody up, Derek Barnett.
Yeah,
he loves it.
Still on the roster, still on the cap,
still
unbelievably so.
Yeah, and I'm a big, I've always thought Derek Barnett was a good player for this team early in his career, and then kind of injuries caught up to him. But yeah, he had a very good rookie season. He just never really ignited from there. And that was a long time ago. That was 6 years ago. So yeah, my point is that you don't have much there, whether you count Barnett or not. And edge rushers are hard to find later in the draft, in my opinion. Now, I know it's a good group, but you look at the top edge rushers last year, they were mostly first round picks or early second. Chris Jones was an early second, but guys like Bosa and Myles Garrett and Hassan Reddick, they're all top 15 picks. There's the outliers of a Matt Judon who came in the 5th round, or Max Crosby for the Raiders who came in the 4th round. But for the most part, 1 to 15 is where you should find an edge rusher. And there are some in this draft that, could help in that regard. I like Nolan Smith a lot from Georgia. Lucas Van Ness has been in for one of the top 30 visits from Iowa. Miles Murphy from Clemson is supposed to be a good edge rusher, but that to me is what Howie Roseman values. And then you look at the offensive line, another part of the trenches, and they lost 2 guys. They lost a starter in Ciamalo and a top reserve in Andre Dillard, who was also playing some guard in a reserve role last year. He just wasn't a tackle. So there's some guys there with versatility. I love Paris Johnson from Ohio State, played right guard. As a 2 years ago with Ohio State. Last year he was a left tackle, so he can play both sides of the line, 2 positions. So that's to me where they're going to go. And Zach Carbonneau is certainly a good consolation prize, if you will. There are other players in this draft, I think, at running back that would help. But you say Rashad Penny, 800 yards. That given his history of health like that,
he's never done it before. But
right,
he's been in the 600s.
And
with a bad offensive line. So that's what I'm going with.
But injuries, that's always the concern. The guy has not been able to stay away from injuries, and you have to factor that in when you start to make your decisions. And it was interesting, Howie Roseman at the scouting combine said, we're going to add at running back. And okay, he added Penny, he brought back Boston Scott. But is that what he was talking about? These are going to be our ads?
Well, no. I mean, he paid Rashad Penny $600,000. So, I mean, they could cut him and
sure,
not lose a second of sleep. So it's not that they're locked in, but it is, when he talks about those lottery tickets, that's the one that looks like the Powerball. Like if he does stay healthy, if they catch lightning in a bottle, I mean, he's already proven he can play. We've seen it from him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if he can average 6.1 yards per carry behind a, at best, pedestrian offensive line, what can he do behind a good offensive line with a quarterback like Jalen Hurts helping? I can see where he's trying to swing for the fences there. But boy, I got to tell you, Ed, I mean, could be Ed Kratz. They might get, well, you might not have the knees at this point, but I think anybody behind with Jalen Hurts in that offensive line, I can't worry about running back, especially when I have so many holes that I have to replace. You're right about Jeffrey Lurie, though, because, and that's where I want to go with you now. He kind of had like a defeatist attitude towards defense. He really did.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you can't do anything against good quarterbacks. That's essentially what he said. Are the Eagles too defeatist on defense? Like, we're going to put it together with fishing wire with Nicholas Morrow and Justin Evans and Terrell Edmonds and spend $3 at the Walmart clearance aisle. Is it too defeatist? And that's where I bring back to the top 10 pick. Get me some talent on defense.
Yeah, it was, and he made a good point, Lurie did, when he said, our 2 Super Bowl appearances, none of the defenses could stop the offense.
They could not.
They were both really high-scoring games. So, yeah, it's interesting if he's, sending the message from on high down to Howie Roseman and his staff that we need to build this offense, then they're going to go offense in the first round. And I'm not sure, it won't be Bijan Robinson, I don't think. Probably an offensive lineman, if that's Lurie's message. But yeah, you're right. They still got to run people out there to play some defense. And, if you don't have the right guys, you're going to put a lot of pressure on that offense to score 30 points a game. Now, the Eagles did that almost last year. They averaged like 28 point something points per game, one of the best in the league. But you still got to be able to stop people. And, to me, you're going to have to find a way to address linebacker, still not fully addressed. Morrow and Dean and who knows who else. That defensive front, it was fun. I'm sure they enjoyed watching that defensive front eat last year with 70 sacks. You lost a big piece. Javon Hargrave accounted for 11 of those sacks. Now, where are you going to find that kind of production? What happens if, Brandon Graham goes down again with an injury, or Sweat or Reddick? All of a sudden, who do you have on the edge to bring in? There really isn't any proven player on this roster. So to me, you have to find those pieces here in the draft, and whether they come at 10 or 30 or in the second round, I'm not sure what Lurie will do, but it was interesting, his comments about let's outscore teams. Let's play offense, because defenses have a hard time stopping prolific offenses. And he might want to make it a prolific offense. And he might tell Howie, hey, let's draft Bijan. He would make this offense prolific.
You're overlooking, both you and John, the number one reason why Bijan Robinson won't be here. The Eagles have Trey Sermon, who might be the greatest practice player in the history of the National
I should always
Football.
Bring up Trey Sermon.
Could knock me over with a feather when the coach was talking about him out there in Arizona. The way that he effusive praise that he gave. How do you not get him into a game? If this is the greatest, nobody can tackle him. You should see him in our practices. How does he not get dressed on Sunday? But I digress. I do want to ask about a defensive player that you mentioned. And in checking a couple of outlets today, had compilation of mock drafts and see who the Eagles picked and most of these educated guess mocks. And the guy who got more nods than anybody else was Nolan Smith, the defensive edge player from Georgia. You said you like Nolan Smith too. I don't dislike Nolan Smith. I think he's going to be a very good football player. I don't think he'd be a good football player for the Eagles, because I don't think you want both Hassan Reddick and Nolan Smith on the same line at the same time, because they're two similar players. Undersized, playing the run, not a strength, pure speed guys on the outside. If I want a defensive end, if I'm going to get an edge guy, I'd rather have one that complements rather than reproduces what Hassan Reddick does. Why do you think Nolan Smith and Hassan Reddick will work together?
Well, I like speed off the edges, but you're right about stopping the run. If they're on the field, can you do it? I mean, people forget this defense was ranked, I think, 16th against stopping the run last year.
And that was with TJ Edwards.
Right. And that was with Edwards, and that was with Kaiser White. But yeah, two undersized guys. But listen, if you're on a third down, if you're in a passing situation and you're not going to run the ball and you insert Smith to go opposite Reddick, good luck stopping speed off the edge with both of those guys. You can leave guys in to, chip on them or a running back, but you have to pick your poison. Who are you going to block, Reddick or Smith, in my opinion? And why I like Smith to the Eagles potentially is that his comp is Hassan Reddick. And, Reddick has, he's got the size, the same frame, 6'2"-ish, 240-ish pounds, maybe a little lighter, 235. And Reddick only has 2 years left on his contract, right? So if you bring in a guy like Smith and, you groom him and you play him in the right kind of role, maybe he can develop into being a Hassan Reddick type player 2 years down the road. And again, Howie doesn't always look, at the year that's coming up when he goes into a draft. He looks long-term. He looks 3 years down the road.
Should you look long-term at number 10? The Eagles are usually drafting at the lowest in the high teens, more often in the 20s. This year, their actual pick, 30. Should you be taking? Oh yeah, we can take a guy we can just slowly develop, and he doesn't really have to hit his full top producing speed till year number 3. Can you really do that with the 10th pick in the draft?
Well, who would you take at 10 that's going to come in and play every single down?
I either a Skoronski, Miles Murphy. You hope that the Texas Tech kid falls down to you. I don't think that's happening. I would certainly take him as a freakish edge guy and plays a different type of edge than Hassan Reddick. I'm okay with going with the edge. The only guy I don't like is Smith because I just think it's 2 repetitions of what you already have in Hassan Reddick.
But whoever you bring in on the edge isn't going to play, all 3 downs. You know what I mean? Because
nobody does.
Well, Bijan
Hassan doesn't play all 3 downs.
Bijan probably would, is my point. He's probably the only guy in this draft that you can bring in. And maybe you're right. Maybe an offensive lineman like a Skoronski could step in at right guard and play every down, or a Paris.
The fans would love Peter Skoronski. That'd be so exciting. But it'd be a hell of a pick. But
yeah, I heard some conversation about his arm length. He's only got the 32 and a.
What are you talking to Groats with arm length?
Yeah, right. He's he's a big arm length guy. But Paris Johnson's arms are over 36 inches, and Skoronski's are only 32. I don't know what
Well, Micah Parsons is a T-Rex, and nobody can block him. So he's got little tiny arms, and nobody can block him. So there's always outliers, and. To me, the one outlier in this draft is Jalen Carter for a lot of reasons. Because I don't think if he didn't have some of the off-the-field stuff, and who knows, he was out of shape at his pro day. Yeah. Maybe that had to do with the stress over the legal stuff. I don't know. But I do know that he was the best player in this draft until all this started. And I saw on ESPN, and I don't know who it was, but they didn't quote them. They didn't get him. Was an AFC scout saying, "Boy, that looks like a Howie Roseman pick, Jalen Carter. That's a Howie Roseman pick." And we haven't talked about this a lot, Ed, but I don't think Jalen Carter's getting by Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And if he does get by Seattle, he's not getting by Chicago. So the Eagles aren't going to get him at 10. Will they go up to get a Howie Roseman pick? And I agree with this AFC scout. If there's ever a Howie Roseman pick, Jalen Carter's that pick. Would they go up to get Jalen Carter?
See, I mean, why is he a Howie Roseman type pick? I mean, did he go into detail on that? Because to me, he's a red flag.
Well, he's a defensive lineman. Obviously, you're assuming he's past that. So you're assuming Dom DeSandro is, cleared him and Jeffrey Lurie's okayed it. So the assumption is he's on the board. From a football perspective, is I think what he was saying.
Yeah,
that's an Eagles pick. This is a player the NFC champion shouldn't be in a position to get but they have this unique opportunity to get who might be the best player in the draft. All due respect to Bijan. Seize the moment is, I think, what he's saying. Seize the moment. Will he seize the moment?
Yeah, well, I'll just say I'm not as high on Jalen Carter as probably everybody else. And I wonder how much he loves football. Howie and Nick love guys that can ball. I'm not sure Jalen Carter loves to ball. I'm not sure his maturity level is a big question mark. Could he fit with a Jordan Davis and the Kobe Dean in a locker room where he was involved in that tragic accident? Good friends of Jordan Davis were killed in that. I talked to Jordan about that, and he was pretty beat up emotionally when those two friends of his were killed. And now it turns out that Davis may have been racing with them, or not Davis, but Carter. I don't know. But, to me, there's a lot of questions that Dom DeSandro and that security staff have to answer. But if he's there, he gets by Seattle, you want to trade up and get him. I don't know if the Eagles have the resources unless a team in that range is willing to take something next year, because the Eagles, we know, are going to have a plethora of draft picks. This year, they just don't have the resources, in my opinion, to move up. I mean, can you imagine Howie Roseman sitting on his hands from when they pick at number 94 and watching 125 players come off the draft board before they swing?
No, I think, but you can send 30 and move up. And you can add by trading down the second, third rounds. He's very crafty.
Yeah, but again, if you go up, you're going to have to give up that 30, right? You're going to have to give up 30, maybe probably something next year. I'm just not sure that's a good use of what they have available for a player that, in my opinion, has a lot of secure red flags that need to be answered. And I think it's a big gamble if they were to move up for somebody like that. Yeah, he has the potential for a big reward. But you have to make sure you're comfortable with that. If you're going to give up the limited amount of resources you have in this year's draft, when already you've got this wasteland on the 4th, 5th, and 6th rounds where you don't pick anybody. Howie talked about how hard it was to sit on his hands after they took Carson Wentz 2nd overall and had to wait to number 79 to take Isaac Seumalo. 77 players came off the board then. Talked about having to leave the draft room, and being talked out of probably making a trade. I mean, imagine sitting for 125 players coming off the board. To me, if anything, he's going to trade back to try to get more picks in those rounds. I just don't see it being a good use of their draft picks or the resources in this draft to move up for Jalen Carter.
Yeah, see, here's why I have the problem with Jalen Carter and taking him. If you just look at the draft order right now, could Seattle use a guy like Jalen Carter? Yeah. Could Detroit use a guy like Jalen Carter? Do they have a desperate need elsewhere where they just have to fill quarterbacks? No. So they could take him. Could Atlanta use a guy like Jalen Carter? Yeah, they could. Chicago could absolutely use a guy. So all these teams are going to pass on him. You've got to assume, as per an Albert Breer report yesterday, that some teams have completely taken him off their board. That they found out something. They've come to a conclusion that this guy certainly isn't worth a top 10 pick. And the Eagles going to take him? Is it because the Eagles have just softened their stance on give us your tired, give us your troublemakers, give us your maniacs. We don't care. Just give us your best football players compared to other NFL teams. If they do that, then this kid better be a superstar, better keep his nose clean, because otherwise they'll be second guessed forever. I just think it's going to be a bad look if the Eagles take him, and a bunch of teams who have legitimate needs for a star player like him at that position go ahead and pass on him. What do you read in the fact that Albert Breer is reporting some teams have completely taken him off their draft board?
Yeah, I would think that's going to happen. I mean, every team evaluates players differently. But yeah, that's telling that other teams. And you look at Howie Roseman, who doesn't like to reach for players that have that kind of a history. And, to me, it just doesn't make any sense. You're right. I mean, it's a high risk, high reward situation with Jalen Carter. To me, I question whether he actually loves to play football. I don't know.
Gotta love ball.
You have to love ball. If I'm going to trade up, I might. If Tyreek Wilson, if we see a first in NFL draft history, there has never been 4 quarterbacks taken in the first 9 picks of a draft. And if we see 4 quarterbacks go in the first 5 picks, and Will Anderson is that 5th pick, Tyreek Wilson's sitting there at 6. Would you trade up? I would go up for Tyreek Wilson maybe, but again, I just don't think with the resources they have available in this year's draft that they're going to be able to get up there and be able to add picks later on in the draft, because they only have 6 picks and 2 of them are in the first round. You're going to eat up that capital to go up for a player, one player, when you have some other needs that you need to address, maybe not just for this year, but 2-3 years down the line when the bill starts coming due on other players like a A.J. Brown, like a Kenny Gainwell, when these contracts start to come up again. To me, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You can get a good player at 10, someone that can come in and do like Jody said and contribute right away, maybe play every down like an offensive lineman. Bijan Robinson, again, I keep bringing that name up. I mean, to me, he's the home run pick in this draft. And, the Eagles have shocked us before. They shocked us when they took Jalen Hurts in the 2nd round. Maybe we're going to be in for another shock with Bijan Robinson at number 10.
They'll always shock us somewhere along, but it's usually the 2nd, 3rd round.
Yeah.
Tyree Wilson, though, you mentioned, he's the other guy, I think. And he's not as high profile, but if they're going to go up, that would be the guy. And Dave mentioned that, Dave Zangaro mentioned that as well yesterday. So that buoyed my thoughts about that, that he would be the other difference maker they might consider, and a targeted move up. I'm not saying going way up, a targeted move up like they did last year with Jordan Davis. Very small move up to make sure they get that particular player if he starts to drip a little bit. You talk about that 2nd first round pick. If they don't move up, they don't move down, which I think you're right, Ed. It's more likely they move down than move up. I'm just throwing it in there for a potential difference-making player. But if they're sitting there with 30 and it's coming down, and we all say, the Eagles don't take running backs since Keith Byers, they don't take linebackers since Jerry Robinson, blah, blah. They haven't taken safety ever in the first round of the draft. Brian Branch, Alabama. For this reason, one, you can call him a defensive back. You don't have to call him a safety because he plays just as much nickel as he does safety. They love those mirrored players, as Jonathan Gannon used to call them. C.J. Gardner-Johnson can play in the slot, can play safety. Avonte Maddox can play in the slot, play safety. You got another guy, Brian Branch. That, to me, fits like a glove. And he ran pretty poorly. At least, not for you and me, but for what he was expected. So I think he's going to be there. Well, the Eagles draft a safety, but call him a defensive back to get around it in the first round of the draft, Ed Kratz.
No, I'm going to say no. They won't do that.
I made my best case.
I know, and he's a good player, but we've seen other really good safeties come into this league before where we've debated whether the Eagles are going to take them in previous drafts, and they don't. They just don't do it. Again, I think edge rusher, offensive line that's the territory, but 30 is also the territory for maybe a Hendon Hooker, who probably is the 5th top quarterback in this draft, maybe even higher than that, but he won't go because of the injury, I guess. But if you're the Raiders sitting, in the early 2nd round and you want to come up and get Hendon Hooker, you could look to come up to number 30 for the Eagles, and you get a quarterback who you have under contract for that extra year. I think that's a trade out territory for the Eagles, number 30 of the 2 picks.
I agree.
I think, if you trade out and you go into the 2nd round and get an early pick, maybe Brian Branch makes sense there. But I just don't see them staying at 30 and taking a player like a Brian Branch. I just don't. I'm not even sure they would do it if they get an early 2nd round pick. I just don't think that they just put that much value. You talk about their linebacker value. You talk about what Lurie said in terms of defense. I mean, I'm not sure they would invest a pick at a spot like safety if you can get an edge rusher, if you didn't address that at, number 10. And there are good edge rushers that you can find early in the second round. And that's more of a value, what they put their value in. So, no, I really don't think Brian Branch would look great on this defense. Good player from Alabama. We've seen how he go to Alabama 2 years ago with Devontae Smith and Landon Dickerson. But I just don't see them drafting Branch anywhere in the first round, wherever they pick.
All right, Ed Kratz, need your opinion on this because we've asked everyone over the last several weeks, since almost a month since free agency really kicked in. Are you good with the Eagles wide receiver core right now, 1 through 3? Or do you think they need to upgrade at wide receiver 3 and push Quez Watkins down to 4? We know they lost Zach Pascal, and he was a specialized guy, very good at blocking, caught the ball when as infrequently they threw it to him as they did. Do you think they need better than Quez as their 3rd wide receiver in their 3 wide receiver sets? And if so, how you get that guy?
Yeah, I think they're fine with Quez at 3. Nick Sirianni said, listen, there's just not as many opportunities to catch the ball. And maybe Quez pressed a little bit, trying to make the most of those opportunities. But 2 years ago, he had a really nice year. Nick Sirianni's praising him as one of the top, he could be a top wide receiver on any team, and he slipped a little last year. So I know it's not a popular opinion. I know people want to bring in somebody better than Quez, but again, he's on a cheaper contract. I'm anxious to see Devin Allen, to see if he is able to take that step after spending a year on the practice squad. Or not the practice. Yeah, he was on the practice squad. I'm anxious to see him. I just don't think, again, with the limited resources they have, I'm not sure they'll take one in the first 2 days. Now, maybe if you get into the 7th round and you haven't gotten any other picks, earlier on day 3, maybe I like a Tank Dell, that receiver. I think he's from Houston, a little guy, real quick, really good.
He's not going. He's going to be day 2. He's not getting to day 3.
You think day 2? Well,
yeah. Oh, I think he'll be a second. I don't think it's a 3rd round pick. If he gets to day 3, no later than the 4th. So the Eagles are going to have to.
I'm still kicking myself on Marcus Jones. I tried to get the Eagles to draft him.
Went to New England.
Yeah,
went to the Patriots, right? Had a pretty good season.
Oh, tremendous. Plays receiver, cornerback, safety, punt returner, kick returner. Maybe the most versatile player in the NFL.
Well, I mean, maybe tell Tank Dell with the 94th overall pick. They do have that pick. I think it depends what they do with their first 3 draft picks, what positions they go to. But I personally think they're fine with Quez. They like Quez. They think Quez is fine. There's not a lot of opportunity for that 3rd receiver. You have to make the most of them, and maybe Quez tried to do too much with them, and it backfired on him, and he pressed and he struggled. He had the injury he mentioned that kind of set him back from a physical and from a mental standpoint. But they could look to upgrade, and how they do it, maybe they go with a receiver in the 3rd. I just don't see it. I think they'll try to bring people in as undrafted free agents. Again, they've done a good job bringing in undrafted free agents that have helped this team. TJ Edwards was one.
Yeah.
Britton Covey, who returned punts, was an undrafted free agent. I know a lot of people don't like him and think they could upgrade there. Maybe they could.
How could you not like Britton Covey? Maybe
Good kid.
The nicest person on the planet.
Yeah, but again, you're thinking football, and you probably find somebody better. But again, taking a leap in his 2nd year, maybe he's a little bit better in his 2nd year. But I just don't see them with the limited resources they have going receiver until maybe the 7th round, and then of course in the undrafted part of the draft too. So
maybe it's because I remember Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore scoring touchdowns in the Super Bowl that I go, yeah, they got to get a better 3rd wide receiver than Quez. Game on the line, Super Bowl, potential championship on the. I got to get a guy who I'm 99% sure is going to catch.
Well, the Eagles don't use that kind of motion, so it's not going to matter, Jody, to have a manufactured player like the Chiefs use.
Understood.
That's another question.
They caught the ball, and I watched Quez drop too many balls this year and let someone pull it out of his hands for an interception.
Well, he would have caught those passes, but the Eagles aren't using that motion, which is a criticism of the coaching staff, the offensive coaching staff. Everybody obviously wants to kill Jonathan Gannon. All right, I'll leave it here at Kratz E. Follow Ed on Twitter, si.com/NFL/Eagles. We can't run back Aaron Cepas again, can we? Not after the Super Bowl. You know, a couple of years ago, I was a big Presley Harvin guy. Steelers got him in the 7th round. Could they dare take a punter in the 7th round of the draft?
Well, I was going to say,
I don't know. I nobody knows names, but I mean, more positional. They need a punter. They need a punter.
I was going to say, if you're going to go down that Super Bowl road with Quez, you can go right down that same road with Cepas.
That's true.
I mean,
very true.
Yeah, but I agree. They need to bring somebody in to compete with Cepas. I mean, he's just been kind of given a free ride as far as no competition in his last 2 camps. You got to bring somebody in to compete with him and try to wrest that job away. And this could be the year. Probably won't come in the draft, but maybe, again, another undrafted free agent type. I'm not sure. There might be a punter or two even still available in free agency.
I'm sure there are, but probably the Brett Kern types.
Yeah, right. So, and again, I haven't studied punter names because, again, it's 6 picks, limited resources. Are you going to go punter? I don't think so.
Well, you can probably get an undrafted one. Last year, the kid from Tulane, another big kid, big punters, he was undrafted. He was really good as a rookie.
Yeah.
Ryan Wright, I believe is his name. He was really good. So you can find undrafted kids, but they got to bring in competition, right? We're not going to,
I would think so.
Here's how the Eagles get their punter. The Eagles' undrafted free agent punter will be this year's Carson Strong. They will give him more of a signing bonus than anyone else will. They'll get the best of the undrafted lot. And you know there'll be 1, 2, 3 max punters who are drafted. So you should get at a minimum the worst case scenario, the 4th best punter in college football this past year. And the Eagles will get him because they remember how much money they gave Carson Strong? That didn't quite pan out. Yeah, that was one I got to take an L on because I thought that was a great move. Oh, this kid was going to be drafted. I got him as non-drafted. He couldn't play in the league. So I got faith in Howie that he's going to get the best undrafted punter by paying him the most money to sign. Kratz, we got to run. Always a pleasure, my friend. How many days till the draft takes place? What are you going to be doing the next 16 days?
Writing about the draft. I mean, what else is there to do? I can't, like you said, to start the show. I can't wait for the draft to start. Come on, let's get here and let's
well, hopefully we gave you some ideas. I'll be looking for that punting piece.
Special K, always a pleasure. Eddie, thanks for hopping on. We'll talk to you again next week or the week after. We're certainly going to get you on again before the draft. Thanks, buddy.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks.
Ed Kratz, John's pen pal at Sports Illustrated, always does a great job when he jumps in with us here on Birds 365. All right, speaking of the draft, in hour number 2, we're going to have a guy who we're going to go heavy draft with, Emery Hunt. I apologize to Emery ahead of time. I honestly, John, you assure me we've had him on before. I'm getting old. I don't remember that. I remember Kratz.
Well, we've done over 500 shows, so it's,
that's a whole bunch of guests, but a lot of them are repeaters. So shame on me. I can honestly say I don't remember Emery. I recognize the name. I've read some of his work. I don't remember him showing up there on Birds 365, but he will make his second appearance in hour number 2.
And by the way, Emery played running back in college. So I want to get his thoughts on not only
you'll have an opinion on Bijan Robinson.
Not only Bijan, but the devaluation of the position as a whole as a guy who used to play it. So, it's
that's a good thing that you mentioned that, because you then have to take his comments in that vein, in that light, looking through that prism, that he's an ex-running back, and he's probably pretty pissed off that they've downgraded devalued running backs in the National Football League. John McMullen, Jody McDonald. Hey, do us a favor, hit that like button. Somebody put it on the stream only 23 likes or something like that. You're watching the damn show. How much does it
like it?
How
Good
much does it cost you
good
to hit the
draft
like button?
intel here if you're
Again,
paying attention.
Zippity doodah. We're working our what's off for you. The least you can do is hit the like button every once in a while. McMullen and McDonald here with you on Birds 365.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood days.
They're carving them up and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Yeah, Mac here with you on Birds 365. Yeah, the countdown to the draft well on. 2 days, 2 weeks. We still got way too much time. So I'm going to put it aside for a couple minutes. Do want to ask you a couple things, Johnny, before we punch Emery Hunt from footballgameplan.com up to talk serious draft stuff. A couple of lawsuits yesterday that were of interest to me and should be of interest to the National Football League. Number one, the Commanders settled a lawsuit with the District of Columbia for non-refunded ticket security deposits or whatever else. On its face, it doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot, but I saw on Mike Florio's site, Pro Football Talk, suggesting that maybe something like that tells us that the sale is getting close, that Dan Snyder could be out of the National Football League sometime soon, which, if you're looking at it from an Eagle perspective, that's not really good news. Dan Snyder has not been a good owner and has helped to, in part, I should say, large part, keep the Washington football team, the Commanders, the Redskins, whatever you want to call them, safely ensconced behind the Eagles in the division more often than not. Yeah, I don't want to see Dan Snyder go.
Yeah, I it is bad news for the Eagles because the new owner would almost have to be better than the old owner. I think, the hope should be, if you're an Eagles fan, that Josh Harris gets the team. I think you've already kind of seen, if you're a 4-for-4 fan, he's not terrible, but he's not the
The
great owner.
76ers just finished up a season where they had the third best record in the NBA.
Well, we all know why. I mean, they spent how many years losing, Jody? I mean, yeah, they got good players, but he doesn't. What I'm trying to say is he's not a win at all cost guy.
That's fair.
He's a, manufacturer, money guy, which there's nothing wrong with it. It's just reality of it. He owns teams. He owns New Jersey in the NHL, I believe, still owns that team.
Oh, yeah.
Now he's trying to go down to Washington to buy a football team. He reminds me of Red McCombs, if you remember Red. Red would just buy sports teams and eventually flip them. That's the type of owner. Still going to be better than Daniel Snyder, but that's your best case scenario. What you don't want is, and remember, if you're buying an NFL team today, you got a lot of money. You've got a lot of money. There's no more Mark Davises. There's no more Browns in Cincinnati. You got to have a lot of money. And if you're willing to spend that money, not just in obvious ways, but behind the scenes ways, when it comes to facilities, front office staff, support staff, that's the worst way. So, I don't know what Jeff Bezos would be as an owner, but I know he's got more money than anybody else. So if he wants to use it to win, that's bad news for the Eagles. Either way, you're going to get a better owner. But, if I were Eagles fans, I'd be rooting for Josh Harris.
I'd be rooting for the sale to fall through so Dan Snyder could stay in charge and the Eagles could keep the football
Well,
team
yeah, that's the best case
in their rearview mirror. And the other lawsuit that I first heard reported yesterday was, have you heard this Dwayne Haskins civil lawsuit down there in Florida? That he was supposedly kidnapped and was being blackmailed. And when he was tragically killed running on a highway, which didn't understand
why.
It
was a strange story. I mean,
it was strange and getting stranger that they found ketamine in his system, which kind of backs the story that he was captured or being kidnapped and given a sedative, and maybe he was trying to get away, and that's why he was out there running on the highway. This is just this is a telemovie that they got to do a Netflix 10-part series on. If this is the case, it was as sad as could be when he tragically passed, but now there's more to it. Now, there were no criminal charges, and this was investigated, and no criminal charges were filed, but a civil lawsuit has been filed that he was kidnapped. Really? Johnny, is this just a attempt by his family to keep the pain in the background, or do you think there's actually something to this?
I mean, I have no idea. There's something to it, but I mean, it was a very strange story. That could be the explanation for why it was so strange. But if he was drugged, you would think that the investigation would have uncovered that type of thing, and the fact that it's civil leads you towards maybe conspiracy theory. But I mean, I don't know if anybody has that information. So they certainly did a toxicology report. So he was legally drunk, I know, at the time. Blood alcohol levels were way above, like 3 times the legal
double legal
limit.
limit, more than double.
Yeah. But the ketamine aspect of it, as you mentioned, there was another drug I can't even remember. They're anesthetics, but they're also used by people who want to get high. So there's kind of a back and forth with that. It was interesting that the truck driver that hit him was one of the suits. I don't know how he's involved. Crazy story.
Maybe he was part of the
story.
kidnapping team.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm not educated enough on drug use to be able to say, yeah, ketamine is used recreationally. Really? As far as I know, it knocks you out.
Yeah. That I know from watching Better Call Saul and Breaking. Yeah, ketamine is using all the time.
Not sure how you would use that recreationally, but it is a very, very, very weird story. And if there is anything to it, then I hope that the people from Haskins family can get to the bottom of this, and if they can be compensated in some way, shape, or form for their loss, more power to them. I just again, this is something you would think you would get on Netflix, not something you would get on the sports page.
You might get it on Netflix eventually.
Yeah, could very well be the case. And one other guy I wanted to take a little bit of a dig at, and I was always a fan of him because I just thought he was pretty cool, and for a period of time, he was very good. Cam Newton saying he should be a starter in the National Football League. You have to have some self-actualization. Cam was bad. He wasn't not good enough. He was flat out bad his last couple of years in the league. And if you really do want a job, coming out and saying you're better than starters in the National Football League, probably not going to ingratiate you with those teams who have those other guys in place as their starters. No one who isn't thinking about drafting a quarterback at the top of the draft doesn't have a quarterback in place right now. Why do guys do that? Is it ego? They just can't control their ego, that they're going to over-evaluate themselves? And I think a lot of guys in the league do that, but they are smart enough to keep it to themselves rather than just put it on blast for everybody in the National Football League to hear. Why do guys do that way? Cam Newton shooting himself in the foot as far as getting a job in the NFL this year.
I mean, one of the dumbest arguments that I hear on with NFL fans and both critics and I'll even go to ideologues with Colin Kaepernick back in the day, is the sentiment that he's one of the best 32 quarterbacks in the world. Now, you've heard me say it as well, but the people that don't add into that could be the case. That could be the case, but situations and context aren't factored in. Like if you're in a position to get a Bryce Young or CJ Stroud or even an Anthony Richardson or Will Levis, would you rather have the young quarterback with upside who maybe isn't ready right now, more so, obviously more so than Bryce and CJ? That would be Levis and Anthony Richardson, or the how old is Cam? 33, 34, who's played forever, and is, at best a 1-year solution. Money comes into it. Nobody brings up money. What did Colin Kaepernick want to play for? 3 years out of the league. He wanted to be a starting quarterback. He didn't want to be a starting quarterback. He wanted a ton of money. He didn't want a ton of money. All of this stuff matters than just sitting down and getting on a soapbox and saying, he's one of the best 32 quarterbacks in the world. How could you go with blah, blah, blah instead of blah, blah, blah? It's dumb. It's regressive. And that's, you talked about the beginning of the show, Jody, about why everything is boiled down to, because people boil it down to that. And then they hitch their wagon to it. Well, he's better than Anthony Richardson. Oh, is he? Not if you're building an NFL team. Not even close. Not even close.
Your point about taking it within the context is absolutely on point and needs to be focused. Here's the problem. I don't even think Cam is one of the best 32 quarterbacks. I've heard people make that argument. Shoot, I made that argument. I made it about Kaepernick because I thought he was one of the best 64 quarterbacks. And there were teams that needed badly to upgrade the backup quarterback, and they just chose not to for the varying reasons that they had. Cam's not even one of the best 32. It isn't like Cam's a high maintenance quarterback and he might be asking more money to the team. All that becomes irrelevant to me because he's not one of the 32 best 32 quarterbacks in the world. And if he's saying, I only want to start, well, no, you're not good enough anymore, Cam. Sorry, your game has deteriorated. And all those other things kind of get pushed to the side when you can't even rightfully, in my opinion, can't rightfully make the claim that you're one of the 32 best quarterbacks. I will go out on a limb and tell you right now, Cam will be exactly sitting on the sidelines when the season starts this year, unless he does a complete 180 and or a team has two major injuries in the preseason. I don't think the call is going out to Cam Newton in this upcoming year. All right, he's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. Emory Hunt from footballgameplan.com going to jump in with us next. Also does some work for CBS HQ. We'll talk NFL draft with Emory Hunt next here on Birds 365.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, we got this. Call 215-458-2222.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood days.
They're carving them up and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
NFL draft can't get here soon enough. We still got 2 weeks and 2 days before it does arrive, but it doesn't stop us from talking about it. John McMullen, Jody McDonald, Mac Birds 365. We got a draft expert to jump in with us from footballgameplan.com. Does work for CBS HQ as well. Emory Hunt joined us here on Birds 365. Are you like us? You can't get the draft here quicker. You put an X on the calendar every single day. Just get here already. Give us something that we can really sink our teeth into. How much looking forward to this draft are you, Emory?
Well, I'm looking forward to it, but you got to remember, I'm football 365, so I've been engrossed in
XFL stuff, getting ready for the USFL this upcoming weekend.
You're watching
In addition to the
XFL.
draft.
Are you Mr. You're the one. You're Mr. XFL. I didn't know one existed.
Listen, man.
Oh, St. Louis, man. Those people love that team. The St. Louis
here's what I don't get is that if we're doing draft stuff and all these scouting reports that I put together, and I know a lot of these guys are not going to go to the NFL, it makes it more watchable to watch the alternate leagues because you know all these guys.
Okay.
So I want to see what these dudes do out there on the field, getting their opportunity to play. So I am always involved in football.
Emery, I see your jersey up in the background. Raging Cajuns. Now, I know you used to play running back, so a couple questions. One, people in Philadelphia are going nuts about Bijan Robinson. I mean, they're not going to take him, but they think they're going to take him. But anybody who knows Howie Roseman knows. So it's a two-part question. Where do you get, and not necessarily this draft, but also, go back 5-10 years. Just how good is Bijan as a prospect? And as a former running back, how do you feel about the NFL as a whole sort of devaluing the position over the past 10, 15 years?
Two great questions. And to attack the first one, initially, I recently just compiled my running back rankings from 2020 to this year's class, and Bijan were ranked third behind Jahmyr Gibbs and DeAndre Swift. I was a big DeAndre Swift fan coming out. So still to say third with an 85 grade in my rankings is pretty high because Bijan to me is a really good, terrific all-around back. He's a 3-down guy. You can leave him out there. He's a great downfield threat in the passing game, not just one of these meets expectations running backs that catches swing, screens, flares, and flats. You're supposed to do that. You can send him downfield in the route, and he'll be excellent. The reason why I like Jahmyr Gibbs better because he does all of those things, just a little bit more explosive and a little bit more dynamic. So for me, whether they take Bijan or Gibbs could kind of help make this offense even faster. It doesn't really matter to me because I feel like they can't go wrong if they go running back at one of these picks. But I feel like with 2 picks in the first round, with the way they've compiled their roster, they're sitting pretty sweet in any direction they go in. And to answer your second question, I just find that these people talk out of both sides of their mouth because they'll say, oh, you don't take a running back high. These guys don't last long. You don't give them a second contract. Their best value is when they first come into the league as rookies. Well, would that make sense to take them in the first round? Because you get them at their youngest, at their best, at their most explosive, and you get the 5th-year option, and you can decide after year 5 if you want to extend them or if you just want to go back into the draft and draft another one in the first round.
Next one, yeah.
And not everybody is a first round back. There's a difference between Barry Sanders and myself. There's a difference between the jokes in the chat, Brian Westbrook, and myself, right? So you want to take the guy that can put the ball in the paint early, very much so, and often. So there's a difference between. I saw some Saints fans talking about this before. Well, you don't really need a Reggie Bush because you can get Alfred Morris. What? Like, it doesn't make sense.
All right, let me ask you about the third of the triumvirates of backs that I think these are the top 3, and then there's a bit of a drop-off, and that's Zach Charbonnet from UCLA. I'm a big fan of his, and specifically for the Eagles, because I think of the 3, he's the best between the tackles runner. I think he's got the capability to bounce it outside and go around the corner and make big plays, maybe not as many as the other 2 backs, but I do like his combination of skills, and I think it's a better fit with the Eagles. How highly do you rate Zach Charbonnet?
He's someone that I would value in that 3rd, 4th round range. I like him as a player. He reminds me a lot of James Conner. So if you look at the way the Eagles depth chart is constructed, you can probably say, okay, he can fill that role. But you kind of ask yourself, do you already have that in what Rashad Penny will potentially bring to the table? I know Rashad Penny has the health issues, but even with you comparing both backs, Penny is much more explosive. He has the ability to hit the home run, and that's what Charbonnet lacks. Charbonnet is more, and it's not a one-to-one comparison. I'm just talking about how, when you look at a James Conner, when you look at a Jordan Howard, these are guys that are kind of more along the lines of your 4-minute offense guys, your pace setters. Now, where I feel like Charbonnet has some success is that he does have better footwork than Conner. So he does have the ability to read front side to back side. I like his vision. He just doesn't have that second gear or even that third gear to really rip that long run. But when you look at the depth chart of Philly, you kind of say, okay, can we bank on a healthy Rashad Penny? And do we have someone, maybe, is he better than Kennedy Brooks? That's the other question that you're going to find these guys kind of going throughout this whole draft process. But the player itself, Charbonnet, I am a big fan of.
The running game as a whole, Emery, and I want to bring Jalen Hurts in the conversation for this reason. Nick Sirianni talked about it last year. I think his quote was, front side wins games, backside wins championships. When you have a quarterback like Jalen Hurts that can pull the football, does that make it easier for a running back in general?
Absolutely. And I've been on this position since 2009. When you have a guy that is mobile, it enhances your run game. You can even go back to Tim Tebow, right? And people love to bank on Tebow, but when he was in Denver, guess who had the beneficiary of seeing advantageous boxes? It was Willis McGahee. You know what I'm saying? And so to me, if you have those guys, CJ2K wasn't CJ2K with any other quarterback outside of Vince Young. He was CJ2K with Vince Young. He was CJ 1300 with everybody else, right? You look at Michael Vick, compare with Warwick Dunn, had his best yards per carry in his career, had his highest season total rushing. It makes it better. So when you have a dynamic quarterback that's a +1 in the run game, paired with a great back, the numbers could be ridiculous. That's why Eagles fans are excited about the potential of a Bijan Robinson or Jahmyr Gibbs. They can see a potentially 2,000-yard rusher if you pair up one of these explosive backs.
Now, to quickly piggyback off that, Emery. So I want you to put on your GM hat. If you're a GM, and this isn't the traditional, play action quarterback, drop back quarterback that needs a significant running game, that needs a Adrian Peterson type that can, run the football. Does that affect your thought process saying, hey, I can get the production I need from a second or a third round back because of my quarterback, and I can go get an edge rusher or a top tier left tackle? Does that affect your thinking as far as how you're building the entire roster?
It depends on which back are we talking about. Are we talking about Zach Charbonnet in round 3, or are we talking about someone that has a potential to go 90 yards on any given carry, right? And so that's the difference. It's the difference between a Barry Sanders and whoever was backing up Barry Sanders. I think it was Gerald Moore or somebody, right? That's the difference. And if you're Philly, you can also even take it a step further. Do we need someone as a slot receiver? I know Quez Watkins is trying to make his hay in that position. Can we get the same thing from a guy in the slot? Which is why when you look at one of these backs, let's say a Jahmyr Gibbs or even a Bijan Robinson, can serve that role too. So yes, you have to look at your team, how it's constructed, how much of a drop-off do we have from Kenneth Gainwell, to the guy that we could potentially draft in round 1. And when you look at, okay, we got a good running game now. Where else on the team do we lack? Do we need a standout pass rusher, a young guy that can really get after it? Are we high enough to go and get a Will Anderson, who I think is the next Terrell Suggs? Or do we look at someone, I know Eagles fans probably have been crying for this, and they haven't really done it. I know they have Nakobe Dean, but man, I'd be hard-pressed to pass up on a Deion Henley late in the first round because of what he does. Remind me a lot of Fred Warner. They can also go cornerback. So they have to look at their roster and decide, it's like a scale. Where are we, kind of lean? Where can we use an elite guy, and where can we get better? Right now, running back does seem like a luxury, but it would be hard to pass up on guys that can ring that cash register up quickly, like a Bijan or a Jahmyr Gibbs.
If there is a position that the Eagles, somewhat like the rest of the National Football League, but maybe even a little bit more so, have devalued, the only one that's been devalued more than running back is linebacker. So Johnny and I keep saying, they're not going to take a running back at 10. They're not going to take They are not going to take a linebacker at 10. That's no chance, no shot, no how, no way. That's just the way that the Eagles look at the value. of the position. So instead, I want to go to you touch on a couple names, the edge guys who are available in this draft. If we put Will Anderson and Tyree Wilson to the side, that they will go before we ever get to the 10th pick in the draft, and I think they both will. Next three guys, Lucas Van Ness, Nolan Smith, and for me, Miles Murphy of Clemson. I have them as the next three edge guys. Some people may have them in a specific order. I want you to put them in the order of how they best fit the Eagles. And if that's, hey, Jody, here's the way they rank. Here's the way you got to plug them in for the Eagles too. Van Ness, Smith, Murphy. How do you rank those three edge guys if the Eagles are going to take an edge guy at 10?
I would probably rank them Smith, and Murphy and Van Ness probably tied. I like the versatility of Van Ness. He has shown that he can rush over the guard, which is cool. You know, it gives you a unique NASCAR package. I like Murphy's ability. He has been productive over the course of years, but Smith to me has elite level close. And that's the ability to see the ball carrier, see the quarterback going away, and just quickly hit that accelerator and close with that length that he has to make the play. I would also throw in a guy, if you can't get one of those three guys, I would also throw in Viliami Fehoko out of San Jose State. He has the energy and the explosiveness off the edge that I just see yielding itself positively to Philly's defense. But if you talk about the specific three that you mentioned, Nolan Smith to me would give them exactly what they want. Pressure. I know that's an all Georgia defense, you know, but
it's what they don't mind it at this point.
It wouldn't surprise me to see them end up with Jalen Carter too. So that could be on the table.
Well, that's what, you know, we don't know. None of us know where teams are when it comes to the off the field stuff with Jalen Carter. But from your standpoint, Emery, just as a pure football player, where does he rank for you in this draft? And sort of that, is he in the blue chip category still after showing up a little bit out of shape? Could have been the stress from everything else going on. Could have been a lot of reasons. The film looks really good. To me, he was the best player in the draft. Is he still the best player in the draft?
I agree. Too many players say he's the best player in the draft, but I will say he's definitely worth a top 10 pick. Put it that way, and can definitely help your defense out right away. And I agree with you. I think when you're dealing with life situations, that really can bother you, which is why I'm also high on Brian Bresee out of Clemson. Another guy that dealt with life issues all throughout last season, in addition to coming back from an injury. He's still a blue chip prospect in my eyes, just like Carter is. And so, again, it's a good draft, especially if you need someone on the interior, both offensive line and defensive line. Carter has shown that he can rush the passer. He can be disruptive in the run game, and he can fill a void playing next to his former teammate in Jordan Davis, in addition to getting that rotational work behind a guy in Fletcher Cox that has been stellar since he's been in Philly. So yeah, I still would take Carter pretty high. And so the conspiracy theorist in me thinks that Philly is the one that planted the seed to, drop the story at the combine when the defensive tackles or defensive line were going to speak at the podium, and puts them right in position to where he can fall to where they're in striking distance to go up a couple spots to go and get him.
Love when our guests put conspiracy theories out there that involve the Philadelphia Eagles. It makes our job easier. I know it doesn't have a direct impact on the Eagles, but as a tangential impact on the Eagles, the quarterbacks. Different people have different rankings of who should be ranked where and what kind of grades they should be getting. And we know quarterbacks are oftentimes overdrafted. How good a quarterback class is this in your mind? Is there a legit debate about who should be number one, Stroud or Young? How do you grade the quarterbacks that are in this year's draft, Emery?
This class reminds me so much of 2017's class. And in 2017 class, I had the three guys clustered as, as guys I would take in the first round. Watson, Mahomes, and Deshaun Kaiser in that order. And I all had them with the same grade. So in this year's class, I have Richardson number 1, Bryce Young number 2, CJ Stroud number 3, but all with the same grade. And then behind those guys, I strongly feel like this is a good year for teams to really either get a solid QB2 with that has potential QB1 upside. Just like 2017, I want to say my fourth quarterback in that class I was big fan of Gerard Evans out of Virginia Tech. Fifth guy was PJ Walker. I wasn't as high on Trubisky, and in this class, I'm not as high on Will Levis. But there are guys within this draft class that I think can be solid QB2s and have that Taylor Heineke type. Hey, let's get him in there and let him start, and then he proves to be a solid player for them, and they could win some games, or like a Sam Howell. This is a really good class, and I know people poo-poo on the guys at the top, and they constantly want to change, but man, people have to understand how now, since COVID, since 2020, how valuable your backup quarterback is, because your starter will miss a game or two. You better have someone that's competent.
Tell San Francisco in the NFC Championship game. You start losing quarterbacks, you're in deep trouble. Hendon Hooker is a guy who was interesting to me because he's older. You mentioned COVID. That's part of it. You have some older prospects now because of what went on. I think he's 25. So, who knows? He might not even be on the field till he's 26 or 27. Do you think he's a first-round talent? Do you think he's a first-round pick? Where do you have Hendon Hooker?
I don't think he's a first-round talent, and I would feel comfortable with him in the second round. And here's why, because you touched on it, and I can't wait till we get back to normal eligibility years. Because as a draft analyst, it's hard to know who's coming out, who's going to take advantage of their 6th year of college football and 7th year of college football. But when you look at now what's happening on the back end, you're getting guys that are 24, 25, 26-year-old rookies. And for quarterbacks, I know that's different. I know it's unique. We love to think everybody can play until they're 40, but not everybody plays well late past 35 like Tom Brady did, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at Hendon Hooker, and this is how I would do it if I'm in the draft room for a team specifically like the Raiders. If you're out of that top 3 where you're not going to get Richardson, Young, or Stroud, don't force a Will Levis at 7. Take a position player, take the best cornerback out there, and then in round 2, get a guy like Hendon Hooker that can come in and play right now, because what you're getting with these guys that are 24, 25 years old, like a Jaron Hall, like a Adrian Martinez, guys that have played a lot of football, they're 24, 25 years old, plop them in there right now with a solid team around them, and they should be able to at least keep this offense or this team afloat to where it puts you in contention to probably get us one of these last playoff spots. So the older prospects, you kind of knock them down because of the upside potential. They're probably at their ceiling. And when you factor in him coming off of an ACL injury, I know it's a knee, but not everybody returns like Adrian Peterson, right? Yeah. So every knee injury is different, and it's a psychological thing mostly. So I think if I'm a team that has a spot for, let's say, a Minnesota Vikings in the second round, would make sense because you still have Kirk Cousins. You're not pressed to push Hendon Hooker out there. It makes sense to get a guy that's able to step in and play right now instead of someone that you need to have to develop.
Just remember Jake Haener. I've been saying this guy for 2 years.
Jake Haener.
Love the kid. He's going to be a day 3 pick. He'll eclipse a Taylor Heineke. He'll actually get a chance to start more games than Taylor Heineke does. But I know he's a day 3 pick, but I love.
He's a gamer. I will say this: he's a gamer.
Yep.
And you saw this down at the Senior Bowl in the drills all throughout the week. He didn't do well. But when the last day of practice, which was that Thursday before they had the Friday walkthrough, Thursday they did game-like situations where they did full team drills and driving down the field in 2 minutes. He excelled. So it tells you he doesn't practice well, but he plays the game well. So he'll do great in a game situation. And I'm glad you brought up Heineke because that's a really good comparison. Hey, some guys may not practice look good in shorts, but when it's time to really lock in and win these game situations, that's where Haener tends to perform well.
And that's what you need out of your backup quarterback. Come in. We're not going to ask you. We're not going to overexpose you. We need you to come in off the bench, keep a lead, be able to win one game for maybe two most, and get your quarterback back. Jake Haener is going to be that kind of player in the NFL. All right. I got to ask you about the other skill position, and that's wide receiver. Eagles have Devontae, and they've got A.J. Brown. So they're not looking for a guy who's going to step in and get 70 catches as a rookie, or maybe even the next 2 or 3 years, because both of those guys are locked up with contracts. But I think they could use an upgrade at wide receiver 3. The Eagles are in 3 wide receivers, what, Johnny Mac, 70% of the time?
A little bit less. They play more 12 than most people, but everybody plays a ton of 11. So you need a third receiver in the NFL, no question about it.
How good is this draft, wide receiver wise, top to bottom, depth? Is this a wide receiver draft where you can get someone late day 2 or some point day 3? If the Eagles, we know the Eagles will be drafting a wide receiver. The question is where and when, and how good a draft is this for them to potentially catch lightning in a bottle?
I think it's really good. Again, just really studying these guys deeply or in depthly, because I break these receivers down into 4 positions. Split in your X receiver, your Z receiver, your slot receiver, and what I like to call bigger inside receiver, which is the Marcus Colston position. And looking across the board, it's a very good group of receivers. So yes, you don't have to take one in round 1. You can get one in on day 2. But when you look at Philly, man, and you think about creating problems, again, that's why I said Philly with 2 first-round picks can really go anywhere, right? I know they have other needs, and you guys touched on wide receiver being not necessarily a significant need, but definitely they want to improve the wide receiver 3. Would you take Jackson Smith and Jigba to step in right there as your slot receiver?
Yeah, but in the first round, no. Second round, no. And he's going to be gone well before that. So I think you got to take him out of the conference. I'm a big fan, and I don't think there's any way the Eagles are going to – they'll have the ability to take him. I just don't think they'll use a first-round pick on him. You don't think Njigba is going to fall into the second round, do you?
I'm not talking about the second round. I'm talking about one of those 2 first-round picks if the situation presented itself. You also have Zay Flowers. You also have Jordan Addison. You have guys that can win one-on-one matchups that you want to pick, that you want to put in the inside and have that success, create that void. It all depends on how explosive you want this offense to be. It was what, the number 1, number 2 offense in the NFL already? Or do you double down and use both of these picks on defensive players or point of attack players, D-line, O-line, just to build that depth and continuity? But for me, when you talk about the receiver class, like I said, it's deep going across the board. It's just about what type of receiver they want to fill. I think they'll focus on that slot position. Yep. And based on what the slot position has done in college football and how we normally see 4 wide receiver sets, sometimes empty, more often than not, we're going to see a bevy of guys at all the different positions at receiver that can play a significant role early in the NFL.
So give me a slot guy, not someone who's going to get drafted in the first or second round, third round or earliest, or maybe even later. A guy might be a little underrated, under the radar, a good slot receiver who will be available in the third round or later.
Let's talk about, I give you want a big slot or you want a small slot? Which one?
What would you say, Johnny? Do you think they would
I want a small slot, because I'm going to ask you a question after this about a potential big slot. So,
all right, let's go small slot. Let's say Josh Downs out of North Carolina is there in round 2. He is someone I think will be there within striking distance for Philadelphia, maybe in that mid-second round range. He's from North Carolina. I've always said this: you give someone like that with that level of quickness and elite speed and burst a 2-way go, it's curtains. It's over for you. So for me, when you think about what they've built on the outside with guys that can win above the rim, and Smith and also Brown, you want someone that can do that much damage across the middle. I think Josh Downs can be that guy at North Carolina, a small slot.
Nice.
Okay. Last one from me, Emery. Before I get to it, make sure you follow him at FBall Game Plan on Twitter. You hear the tremendous knowledge he has about the NFL draft. footballgameplan.com. Your 2023 draft guide is out, so people can order that. Make sure you do it. I want to go outside the box, and I'll give my friend Dave Zangaro credit for this because he mentioned it yesterday on the show. And I said, that piqued my interest. The Eagles need an upgrade, as Jody mentioned, as sort of that third receiver. Not really their fourth receiver, because Dallas Goedert is their third receiver. Why not? I just mentioned they play more 12 personnel than most teams. And they love Georgia players now. We're talking about them all. They might get Jalen Carter. They might get Nolan Smith. Last year was Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean. Darnell Washington, the tight end from Georgia. If you have Dallas Goedert can play in line, he's a great blocker. If you have a kid like that who was so athletic as a flex receiver, and you have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith on the field, what do you do? What are your thoughts on Darnell White, who didn't play a lot because Georgia's so good, but he's got so much athletic talent, so many gifts from a size, a matchup standpoint. Just your general thoughts on him.
I feel like he's one-dimensional. I feel like he's what the Colts have in their big tight end that they drafted last year, Jelani Woods out of Virginia.
But that one dimension is receiving, right?
I think he's just a big. I think he's just a big guy playing against 18, 19-year-olds, which is why Brock Bowers was their dynamic duo.
Oh yeah, well he's tremendous.
I feel like if you take a Washington, I think Washington is really good in a run game. That would allow you to put Dallas Goedert, kick him in more of a flex H-back position, and allow him to run routes because he's a better route runner than Washington. He's a better receiver than Washington. Now Washington can then kick out wide as your red zone threat because he's big. But in terms of like doing a lot of the things that Dallas Goedert does, I think Goddard is a much well-rounded player than Washington is. But Washington would still give you what you want in a run game with the seam flexibility because he's such a big guy going down the middle of the field. Also can be as a jump ball guy inside the red zone. But I feel like someone like Sam Laporta of Iowa would be a better fit from a dynamic standpoint because now you have two route runners essentially that have blocking experience right there at tight end. But Washington, if you're expecting him to be, Jimmy Graham, I don't think that's his game.
All right, last one for me. Last year with the Eagles, they got off to a phenomenal start in turning other teams over. It's got a lot of turnovers, kind of petered out in the second half, probably due to C.J. Gardner-Johnson's injury. They just didn't turn teams over, and the coach likes to talk about chunk plays and avoiding chunk plays and getting turnovers and the like. I want to ask about a very specific kid, Emmanuel Forbes from Mississippi State. Eagles had him in as a draft visit guy, 6 pick sixes in his career at Mississippi State. Talk about turnovers, taking it to the house with a turnover is something everybody on the planet wants, and you just can't project though. You can say he did it, but you can't say he'll do it as soon as he gets to pros. Eagles brought him in. They're going to take some secondary help at some point. It's not going to be with either the 10th or the 30th, just my opinion. How good a player is he? Do you think he can do the type of things he did at Mississippi State in the NFL?
What ball skills like that shows you? It shows you a guy, and it's different than, remember the safety Louisville had, I want to say probably about 8 years ago, they had like 13 interceptions his last season at Louisville. But
13,
a lot of those,
really?
Yeah, he did.
Wow, how do I not remember that? 13. That's an ungodly number.
Well, here's why. Because he wasn't the best athlete. He wasn't fast. And a lot of those interceptions came off tips, and he just happened to be in the right spot, right?
Okay.
But Forbes, that's not the case. Forbes does show the high-level football instincts, twitch, and IQ to really turn the ball over. And he actually does a great job when he's playing off coverage. So now, if you're thinking about it from a defensive standpoint, you can press on one side and have him sit off on the inside, on the other side of the field, and dare you to throw that quick slant, dare you to throw that bang eight, dare you to throw that dagger route. He's going to jump it. He's going to turn it over. And like you mentioned, he's going to bring it back the other way. So obviously everyone focuses on his weight, him being 166. But when you watch him play, he's throwing that 166 in the run game and blowing stuff up too. So, nice. And I'm not worried about weight. You're going to be able to gain weight. There's enough cheesesteaks in Philly to help him with that, right? So I'm not worried about him being 166. I love the instincts. I want to see him get better and much more confident with his hands because he does have the length, and he has to know that, hey, I'm a long guy. I have to use it consistently at the pro level to be able to play more bump press coverage. But when you're playing him off, adjacent to someone that's playing press, quarterback's going to have a problem.
Yeah, I'm not going to worry about his weight because just 2 years ago, I remember being
Devontae.
Devontae Smith. Look at those toothpicks for legs. How the hell is he going to stay upright in the National
Football League?
By the way,
Emery, I agree with Jody. I now don't care about it because I've watched Devontae, but Devontae's special. He does have toothpicks for leg. It's amazing. It is amazing, and he's really a physical player. But to your point,
I don't think he's not afraid to throw his 166 pounds into the mix and make tackles.
Yeah,
that's what you want to hear about a 166-pound guy.
I don't think he can gain weight. So, actually, real quick, Kalijah Cansey, same size thing. He's such a unique player. I don't think it's fair to compare anybody to Aaron Donald, but obviously the Pitt comparisons. How high do you think he could go? Because I've seen wild, everywhere from 10, the Eagles to, mid-20s. Where do you think his range should be?
I think his range should be round 2. Because we kind of love the quick flash of the, quick pressure, get in the backfield to make a play. But when you watch these guys on a down-to-down basis and you see how they handle duo blocks, combo blocks, getting off blocks, that's only going to ratchet up as you get to the pro level. I feel like he could be a good situational guy, good NASCAR package guy, because he even has some ability to rush on the outside. So, but if you're taking him high, you're expecting him to be that down-to-down guy up front. I don't think that's where his skill set is from a consistency standpoint, from a point of attack strength standpoint. That makes him different than Aaron Donald in that regard. So I think his range should be round 2. I know he tested well. I know he ran fast, all that good stuff. But just from a pure functional strength standpoint, he has to improve there, which in my book would slide him down to round 2.
Emery, great stuff. We appreciate you coming on. We're running a little bit late. Between you and me, we could probably do 25 more minutes with you if we had it. Thank you very much for jumping in with us today, and we'll get you on after the draft.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me.
Thanks, Emery.
Emery Hunt from footballgameplan.com. You can catch him on CBS HQ as well. All right, J-Mac, coming back. We got to put a bow on the show here on Birds 365.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wild wood days.
field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
I appreciate both the guests we had on here today, Kratz and specifically Emery Hunt, who was just on with us. I'll let you play a guessing game, Johnny Mac, as we wrap this bad boy up. Why do I like Emery Hunt? What did Emery Hunt say today that impressed me more than anything else?
I don't know. I'll tell you what impresses me about Emery.
Go ahead.
He's not a groupthink guy. Like, you know, you hear all these, you know, everybody's in the same cluster. Like he does his scouting reports, and he doesn't give a rat's ass about somebody else's scouting reports. So, but I don't know where you're going. Here's
where and why I appreciated Emery Hunt. He revealed that he ranked Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, and Deshaun Kaiser with the same exact grade. Yeah. If you made that call a couple of years ago, I'd be sweeping that one under the rug.
Oh, yeah.
If you had Deshaun Kaiser on a parallel with Deshaun Watson,
well, that's another thing.
Mahomes,
you should like me. I say the same thing about Ryan Leaf, but a lot of people had Deshaun Kaiser. I remember when Deshaun Kaiser was number 1 coming into that season. All the early
before the season started, yes.
Yeah. All the early mock drafts, which are meaningless, obviously. That's the reason why. A lot of them had him at number 1 overall. And, he had a bad year.
But he
just kept going down.
And if you had him ranked that at the end of the year going into the draft, I was a little nervy. And I appreciate a guy who says, yeah, I got this right. I got this. Oh, my God, did I get that wrong? You make your picks. That's what your gig is. You're putting your opinion out there. You got to take the wins with the losses.
One of the dumbest things is, how he can't draft, how he got Jalen Reagor wrong, how he got that. Everybody gets draft picks wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody. Not one, not two. Everybody gets draft picks wrong.
And I like to think of myself as a pretty good scout / evaluator when it comes to college football quarterback talent. Yeah, I thought Chad May was going to be Troy Aikman coming out of Kansas State, and the kid just couldn't play in the National Football League level. Yeah, you get some right, you get some wrong. You take your.
I prefer to talk about. I got Aaron Donald right, but I got Ryan Leaf. That was a big swing and a miss.
And I like when guys cop to those that they get wrong. And we'll give you credit if you get it right. So thanks to Emery Hunt. Thanks to Ed Kratz. Tomorrow we got Mike Gill early in his usual Wednesday spot. And, Matt Manicherian's going to jump in. Yeah. Another one of our
scouts. Yeah.
We're heavily into the draft. It's still 2 weeks away, but we're going to beat it to like a drum until we get there. Johnny Mac, you and I back again tomorrow. You in?
I'm in.
The return of Mac and Mac in 2 and 2, 22 hours, that is.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate, inside the locker room, and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.